So a bit about VisionMobile. We are an analyst company, UK based. We have an office here, and we run the largest research on app developers, about 8,000 to 10,000 app developers twice a year. And quite recently, we surveyed IoT app developers, and we got lots of interesting insights on what they do, who they are, what they're looking for, which platforms, how much money they make, and lots of other things. We're very proud of our clients, Microsoft, Intel, Google, Amazon, Mozilla, and a few others. And we're here to introduce our view on what IoT is. Stein has been working on it for far too long, probably 2.5 years, researching IoT and hundreds of companies in that space. And so the data comes from this report. We just launched it last night, just in time for Open Coffee. And it's based on 4,000 app developers, and it's also based on this report that's coming out on Monday, which is IoT Megatrends. But I'll dive right into IoT. So, what is Internet of Things? What is Nest? Is it a thermostat? It's not just a thermostat. It's much, much, much more. I would say Nest represents what IoT is and isn't. IoT is not about the internet, and it's not about things. And unfortunately, we have to get over that. Nest is not just a temperature meter. It has presence. It has CO2 sensors. It has understands the weather, understands how much electricity and so on people around you use. It's functioning as an intelligent device that adjusts the temperature, but based on anything else but the temperature. In our view, IoT or Nest represents much about what IoT is and isn't. So it's not about the connectivity. It's not just yet another device that includes temperature. And let me give you a few more examples. So Nest plays in smart home. And there's many more verticals. There is smart city, wearables, connected car. There's at least probably another 4 verticals that are investing and have activity in IoT. And all of them, what they have in common is they have sensors, much like Nest. But they actually take data out of these sensors, and that's when they create value. They mash up the data, they create applications like parking applications, fitness applications, energy management applications, parking and car insurance and car safety applications, and many, many more. So IoT is not really about internet or about things. It's not about connecting stuff. It's not about just adding computing capability to stuff. It's about the data that comes out of the device and then can add intelligence. And moreover, it's about the developers who can take that data and create applications that nobody imagined out of those. And Stein will talk more about how developers, by using that data, can create industries far larger than internet or things.
Yeah, so is Internet of Things a big opportunity for you guys, right? You might have heard predictions of billions of devices, tens of billions of devices, hundreds of millions or even trillions of dollars in terms of economic value. That's a bit, you can't really fathom what that means. But we do think that Internet of Things is a huge opportunity in the next few years. And why do we think that? Because we draw the parallel with how the mobile industry evolved over time. And the mobile industry today is defined by smartphones. Smartphones started back in early this century, and you had the early devices there like Symbian, like BlackBerry, and they represented a nice growing market. But what we understand today as the mobile industry is really driven by Android and iOS, and everybody here in the room no doubt knows about that. Well, we think Internet of Things today is at that tipping point. It's at the same kind of point in its evolution as mobile was at that exact moment when iOS and Android came on the scene and changed everything. And it did indeed change everything. So you can see on the graph how much more mobile we have now today than what we had at that particular point. So Internet of Things, we can expect that same kind of expansion over the next years. Now, one thing about iOS and Android, what you might notice is that they're consumer devices, or at least they were primarily consumer devices when they first came on the scene. Unlike BlackBerry, unlike Windows Mobile, who were very focused on the enterprise space. If you draw the parallel with Internet of Things today, a lot of the activity in Internet of Things is in fairly enterprisey, corporate kind of applications. Factory automation, smart meters, things like that. We think, though, that going forward, the consumer IoT space, the wearables, the smart home, all these kind of things will become much, much, much bigger. And the reason for that is that there's a lot more opportunity for diversity there. Just like in mobile, now you have millions and millions of apps, whereas before you just had the business applications because that was the customer. In Internet of Things going forward, we'll see many, many more applications than what we can even imagine right now. Famous investor Mark Andreessen, Silicon Valley guru, I might say, called it 1,000 niches and needs that the platform owner could not imagine, let alone had time to accommodate. And we think that the same will happen in the Internet of Things. So we think that it's time for consumer Internet of Things to come forward. And actually from our data that shows, so we did a large-scale survey, as Andreas said, 4,000 Internet of Things developers, and look at which kind of verticals they're developing for most of all. Smart home and wearables come on top, and by quite a margin. Let those be the two very distinctly consumer-oriented verticals in that list of things that we asked. Look over here, connected car. What's going on with connected car? Up till recently, connected car meant car makers and whatever car makers put on their dashboard. Last year, though, Google came out with Android Auto, Apple came out with CarPlay. The same kind of recipe that we saw in mobile now being brought to the car. The same direct-to-consumer model. It's like the connected car is being consumerized, whereas before it was, backroom deals by the car makers. And immediately the interest of developers shoots up. So who are the players in the Internet of Things? Who are the big platforms that are out there and the ones that going forward will dominate that scene? This is per vertical, the top 3 platforms that came out of our survey in terms of the interest shown by developers in those platforms. So not on the consumer side now, but on the developer side. I don't know if you notice anything. There's an awful lot of Google and Apple and Samsung on that list. I don't know if you noticed that, especially in the specific vertical. So not so much in the general purpose, but smart home wearables. It's all Google, Apple, Samsung. It's the big smartphone giants of today that are moving into that space and that are taking the top spots there. It's very difficult for other people to come up. By the way, in smart home, SmartThings is now owned by Samsung. Nest is now owned by Google. One back, please. Yeah, there's 2 others that you might notice here. Amazon and JD. For those of you who don't know JD, it's the 2nd largest e-commerce company in China after Alibaba. It's the 2nd largest worldwide when it comes to sales to consumers. So it's a really big e-commerce companies. What are they doing there? Well, in the general purpose platforms, they offer not just the technology, but they offer commercial services, right? A bit like Apple and Google and Samsung can bring a lot of users to developers, so can Amazon and JD.com. So those 2 kind of categories, the smartphone guys, which we call ecosystem expanders, and the e-commerce guys, which we call trade boosters, those seem to be the platforms that are really taking the lead when it comes to making developer platforms nowadays. If this happens, if indeed the Internet of Things becomes just an expansion of what we have now in smartphones, that has actually quite some repercussions. We know that today iOS and Android rule alone in the mobile world. There's nobody else who comes close. People are trying, BlackBerry is still trying, Windows Phone is still trying. but they don't really come close. That has good reasons, and if they expand into the Internet of Things, then they might actually get that same kind of duopoly, that same kind of dominant position in the Internet of Things as well. Back to you guys. What are you guys doing in the Internet of Things, and what kind of challenges do you face? What do you face when you actually want to get into the Internet of Things and make some products and put some products out there? Those are the top 2 challenges faced by developers in our survey. The first is, guess what? The lack of platforms, or the lack of standards, or the lack of something dominant that you can develop to where you can ignore everything else. So that we already saw. We are seeing dominant platforms starting to emerge in the Internet of Things. So that's good news. That challenge might disappear very shortly. The second challenge, especially for people who right now are not yet professionally dealing with the Internet of Things, is the lack of hardware development knowledge. So that's a tip for all the people here in the room. School yourself in hardware development. It will pay off. Whether you're in a startup, whether you're working for a bigger corporation that's doing Internet of Things, whether you want to be an employee in the future, whether you want to generate opportunities for you in the future, it will pay off to learn hardware. And the reason is that it will be very difficult for companies, Internet of Things companies all around the world, to get hardware developers to come to them. So if you're a good one, you create opportunities for yourself. So just in closing, I want to leave you with those 4, 5 words. Think about consumers, not enterprise. Enterprise is what Internet of Things is today. It's what it represents today. The biggest, the most revenue-generating applications are in the enterprise space right now. Going forward, though, with the emergence of platforms that are somewhat like iOS and Android, and that might actually be created by the same people, we will see consumer applications coming much more to the front. It will be an easier opportunity for you to get into. And going forward, it will also be the winning opportunity. Look at what happened in mobile. Second is data. Think not about the technology per se, how to do connectivity or how to make an app that connects to a device. Don't think about the internet, don't think even about things. Maybe you don't even need a new physical thing to generate or to do the same use case. Think about data and what you can do with data and how you can combine data and how you can shape that into an interesting application, into knowledge about your environment and the meaningful action that comes from that. And do that in niches, do that in very specific applications. What makes the mobile platforms in mobile so powerful is that they cater to thousands of very specific niches. Single apps that don't represent a big market perhaps by themselves, but altogether they do. And what we see is that the winners in mobile are those that manage to find all those new niches. They will exist in the Internet of Things, so go look for them. And finally, leverage platforms. They're coming. They're emerging right now, so keep an eye out for them. Use them, build value on top of them, and build a business out like that. So with this, I will close it. That's where you can reach us. And by the way, we're hiring, so feel free to come and talk with us either today or over email later on. Thank you.
So thank you, gentlemen. We have time for a few questions. Are there any, or please?
You mentioned 4 points to focus for Internet of Things, but you haven't mentioned security. I think this is the main reason people won't buy Internet of Things. For example, I wouldn't buy a thermostat Nest if somebody can hack into it and consume energy in my house. What about how the security will work for Internet of Things?
Yes, it's a very active topic in the Internet of Things, isn't it? Everybody's talking about security and by extension privacy, which is a different but similar thing. When it comes to whether an Internet of Things solution will be adopted in the market, because there are different aspects of this, but when it comes to market adoption, think about it this way. Tim Cook recently, in a presentation, mentioned that 99% of mobile malware is found on Android. But 1 billion people use Android. Think about Facebook when you talk about privacy. You know, more than 1 billion people are using Facebook, and they make a business out of violating your privacy. That's their actual business model. So security and privacy seem to not be a blocking factor somehow. It doesn't seem to be a roadblock for market adoption. At the same time, when we look at how developers look at platforms and whether they care about security there, we see that that's actually, again, not the case. A lot of the devices that are coming out now are actually not very secure. Hewlett-Packard did a study on that. And also, a lot of people think that this is important. A quarter of developers in our survey thought that security and privacy are important, but only something like 10% would actually select a platform based on how secure or how private or how data secure it actually is. So it seems that there is a lot of discussion about it, and the discussion is important, but when it comes to adopting either platforms from the developer side or devices from the consumer side, it doesn't seem to be as important as is being made out.
Thank you. Next one. Please.
You mentioned some platforms are rising to the occasion for IoT. How can we get our hands on them, and are they open source?
Yeah, the question is, just to repeat, for all of you to listen to it, are there any platforms, open source or not, that you would suggest in order to utilize them to build things?
So the question is, what does a platform bring to you, and what do you think is important about a platform? Historically speaking, the platforms that get most traction, it doesn't really matter whether they're open or open source or not. It matters whether they can provide you with traction for your product. That's the benefit that Android and iOS have in mobile over other platforms, including open source ones. Ubuntu, to name one, right? The same seems to be true in the Internet of Things. There are open source platforms. I'm thinking of Eclipse Smart Home in the smart home. OpenHab is another one in the smart home. Nimbits is a general purpose one. There are several open source platforms out there if that's your thing. When it comes to build a business though, you might want to look for a different criterion. Not so much open versus closed, but does it get me traction or not? That's my answer.
Is there another one? Okay, last one here.
Hello, thank you. So to me, the biggest obstacle in the Internet of Things today is the barrier of ownership, meaning energy. So we see lots and lots of people trying to develop wireless energy solutions towards 15, 16, 2070. Where do you see the solution coming from to this specific issue? It will be more of better button technology, more lower consumption, or indeed wireless technology in the coming years?
We haven't researched that specifically. We're looking primarily in our research at software platforms, not so much on the hardware side. But to give you an answer, I think it will be a combination of many things. I mean, things are happening in batteries, that's for sure. Look at what Tesla is doing in the smart home. They're making a battery pack for the home now instead of just for the car. Things are happening in low energy as well. A lot of that technology comes from mobile. In that sense, the smartphone, this little device, has really been a jumping board and kind of a precondition for the Internet of Things. So a lot of the technology that's being developed constantly to make better smartphones with longer battery lives and so on will get ported into the Internet of Things as well. And will be kind of the driving force at the moment for the Internet of Things until it's big enough as a market to take over its own R&D.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.